It's fight night. UFC 309 is later tonight, and ever since it was confirmed Jon Jones would still be fighting Stipe following his return to the UFC after his pectoral injury, people have questioned why Tom Aspinall is not in Stipe's place. Of course, Jones was scheduled to fight Miocic before Tom was the interim champion, but now there is an interim champion, and in every other scenario like this, the belt has been scheduled to be unified. Think of the interim belt as a guaranteed shot at the title the next time you fight. Things took a turn for the worse when Jon Jones not only expressed his disinterest in fighting Tom, but kept claiming Alex Periera would be a better fight and bigger fight for him. But after stalling the division for almost 600 days, while in the meantime Aspinall racked up a title defense for an interim belt, officially giving him more title defenses at heavyweight than Jon Jones, no one is entertaining a fight between Jon Jones and Alex Periera right now. But this begs the question, is Jon Jones ducking Tom Aspinall? And if he is, why is he ducking Tom Aspinall? The way Jones puts it, he's not ducking Tom Aspinall. He simply does not care to fight Aspinall because Aspinall will do nothing for his quote-unquote legacy, stating that he's more than happy to relinquish his heavyweight title and simply do legacy fights from here on out. I would like to say that there is nothing actually wrong with this from Jones. If he's not going to stall the division, then I personally don't think there is any reason for me to want to see Jones versus Aspinall. It's not like Jon is still moving good at heavyweight or has looked great in his past few fights. While it would be cool to see him in the octagon once again, I also don't think it's needed for someone with such an extensive resume. And in all honesty, my main problem with him not fighting Aspinall is the fact that it was disrespectful to the sport for the champ to skip the interim champ, and it's disrespectful to Aspinall in general for him to not have his rightful shot at being the champion. Even if you are one of the people who believes Jones could beat Aspinall if they fought and he just be wasting his time, the name of this company is not the Jones Fighting Championship. It's the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and Jones' inflated ego doesn't give him the right to hold up an entire division. Aspinall deserves his respect of a simple shot at the title, and while Aspinall is young, he's only getting older. His ability to reign as champion for longer is directly hindered by him getting the belt later, and that's rather he beats Jones and takes it, or gets it as a result of Jones vacating it. Jones' excuses don't sit well with the fans of the sport, however, or fans of his own. Years of lying and involving himself in constant controversy have done irreparable damage to his credibility. I want to propose just for a second to everyone, for 1 second, just assume that Jon Jones is actually telling the truth about why he won't fight Tom Aspinall. He's actually only in it for his legacy and only wants to do fights that can bring him a big payday and look good on his resume. I bet no one has actually done that before. No one has listened to Jones talk and concluded that he was telling the truth. Just for the record here, this is 100% possible that Jon Jones is not ducking and is not scared of Aspinall, but because of who Jones is, we as fans will never believe the words that come out of his mouth. So we have to do our own digging on if Jon Jones is ducking out Tom Aspinall to answer the question proposed in the intro. And if that's true, we can start talking about why Jon Jones is ducking Tom Aspinall. The question of if Jon Jones is ducking Tom Aspinall, unfortunately, has to start with Stipe Miocic. And I say unfortunately because Stipe really does not deserve the blatant disrespect that's been coming his way. We all know Jones should be fighting Aspinall to unify the belt, but Stipe has a chance to not only return to the UFC, but return to a title shot and a big payday at that. Stipe seems to be a genuinely great guy, the opposite of Jon Jones in a lot of ways. Where Jon hit a pregnant woman's car and fled the scene, Stipe's literal job is to put out and save people from fires. On top of that, he's been the heavyweight champion 2 times before, and we all get that he's probably going to lose to Jones. We know he just came off a 3-year layoff after a knockout, and we all know he's a 42-year-old man now out of his prime, but that doesn't mean it's fair to look past him like so many people have, because regardless of what we think, the fight hasn't happened yet. And in the UFC, the belt belongs to no one. Upsets happen all the time. Drake, who literally loses every sports bet ever, placed his bet on Jon Jones to win by KO. So luck is on Stipe's side, at least in that area. But that's enough of my little rant. Stipe is a great guy who hasn't even had his chance yet, of course, but let's not forget this fight was scheduled to happen before Tom Aspinall ever became interim champion at heavyweight. It was Jones' injury and pulling out of his fight when Stipe was originally scheduled in October of 2023 that even caused Tom to get a shot at an interim title. That being the case, I don't think it's completely unreasonable for Jones to want to complete his fight with Stipe before fighting Tom. Like I said earlier, I think Jones will probably win, and if he's in the headspace of fighting Tom immediately after UFC 309, none of this would have ever been a discussion in the first place. But unfortunately, that's not the case with Jon, and here we're going to have to get started getting into the reasons he says he won't fight Tom, and there are a few of them, so bear with me. First one being that Tom hasn't done anything and simply does not deserve the fight. This reason was a much bigger deal before Jones admitted his willingness to give up the belt, but I think it's pretty clear that Jones did not want to give up the belt and likely still doesn't want to give up the belt and is only saying things to try and get people off his case about not fighting Aspinall. The answer to the question of if Tom deserves a title shot is extremely simple. Let's ignore his interim title for a moment, but compared to when Jon got his first title shot, Tom has beaten more people, finished more people, has a lower average fight time, and has currently beaten 4 out of the top 10 contenders at heavyweight, while himself being at the number 1 contender spot. This is all without mentioning that he is the current interim champion in the division and the only interim champion in the history of the sport to defend the title, giving him, like I said earlier, more title defenses than Jones in the heavyweight division. So Jones posturing about Aspinall not deserving the title shot and how he really hasn't done anything is absolutely bull and shouldn't even be entertained. Jon's other reason is that Tom simply has been an a-hole to him, and that if he was a little bit nicer, maybe they could have worked something out. Ignoring Jones himself being an a-hole, you would be hard-pressed to even prove that 90% of Jones' opponents were not assholes to him before they fought. Jones is literally popular for having the most insane violent rivalry with DC, where they were constantly rude to each other, and just now leading into the fight with Stipe, he's upset that Stipe called him the B word and an a-hole. It seems almost as if Jon needs to dislike his opponent to actually fight them with all he has. Alexander Gustafsson was like this as well, extremely mean to Jones, but this is contradictory to something else Jones said in another interview as well, where he claimed Tom was doing everything right and he should be doing the things he's doing. So following Jones' line of reasoning here, it sounds like Aspinall should have gone about doing things the wrong way, and if he did, then Jones would fight him. This is obviously floundering. Jones is looking for reasons to not fight Aspinall while himself coming off as a normal guy who actually isn't that bad. And what that leads to when you aren't telling the truth is contradictory statements and holes in your reasoning. This next one, Jones hasn't said directly is a reason he doesn't want to fight Aspinall, but it's something he keeps mentioning, which is that Aspinall is 7 years younger than him and 30 pounds heavier. And yes, this is true, but this doesn't matter almost at all. I can't speak for Jon Jones and how he's feeling in his own body, but historically, heavyweights and bigger guys have been able to keep up their fighting for longer than the smaller guys. DC was 38 at the time he first fought Jon Jones, who was the same age then as Aspinall is now. Not to mention, after the fight with Jon, DC went on to beat Stipe and become the heavyweight champion of the world. So the age here, at least statistically speaking, shouldn't be that big of a deal, and the weight difference, while big, also shouldn't make that big of a difference either. There are weight classes for a reason, of course, and there's a reason why heavyweight is the division with the most leeway. And it's because at these sizes, the weight disparities don't matter as much as they do in the weight classes before. So this one is far more opinionated, and like I said, I don't live in Jon Jones' body, so I can't tell him what's going on with his body, and if he feels like this stuff is genuinely affecting him a lot, then hey, I guess so. It just seems a little bit fishy to me. To end this little section off, I'd like to ask about a reason Jon won't fight Tom that I actually think is valid, or rather he spoke this one in a context of why he's not ducking Tom, which is what I brought up just a bit ago. He's simply scheduled to fight and wanted to fight Stipe, and he was never scheduled to fight Tom. This is obviously true, and while I think this is a valid reason, that doesn't mean it should be the case, nor does it conclude that he is not ducking Tom Aspinall. I think something Jon doesn't understand is that us as fans of his fights and fans of the sport in general want to see him against Aspinall. Relinquishing the belt is cool for Aspinall because if you genuinely don't want to fight him, of course you don't have to, but we want to see that fight. That's why an answer like that will never be fine as a fan of Tom who thinks he deserves it, but considered to be ducking for anyone who is just a general fan of MMA and combat sports. So, is Jon Jones ducking Tom Aspinall? The answer, in my honest opinion, is a simple yes. I don't think there is a solid argument you can make that Jones isn't running away from the current interim champion, and it's not like this is the first time something like this has happened. Jones ducked Francis Ngannou for years before moving up to heavyweight after Ngannou parted ways with the company, but before this, ducking with Tom Aspinall, that could never really be confirmed. And to be fair, it would be Jon moving up a weight class and all this other stuff, but that's not the point of this video anyway. So I don't want to dive too deep into it. We're concluding Jones is ducking Aspinall because of conflicting reasons of why he isn't fighting him that don't seem to line up. Poor excuses claiming Tom doesn't deserve it when he provably does, and his constant use of the word gambling when talking about the fight, which implies he isn't confident he can win, as the only reason you don't gamble is the fear of losing what you have. Now, I wanted to shift focus a bit and start talking about why Jon Jones is ducking Tom Aspinall. And while this might be an easy answer for some of you, just saying, oh, he's scared of losing, I want to know why Jones is scared of losing, why he isn't interested in fighting to prove he's the best currently, and why he seems too timid when it comes to this new challenger. Let's focus on Tom's side of this first, since given his short career, he's easier and quicker to cover than Jones. Tom is an extremely dangerous fighter. We're talking about a guy who has been to round two once in his entire career, and whose only loss is because of an injury he suffered, which he avenged in 2 years with the first ever title defense of an interim belt, and once again, in Tom-like fashion, finished the fight in the first round. That fight in particular meant more to someone like Jones on Twitter. Jones was claiming how film study was one of his greatest strengths, and he wouldn't be surprised if Curtis Blades won by knockout or ground and pound. So here, Tom defied Jones' expectations and finished the guy who Jones was convinced from all his film studying would beat Tom. This is extremely important because Jones talks about his film studying a lot. It's something we know he likes to do to get a complete read on his opponents. So this means that he did that and was completely wrong. One of his own self-proclaimed greatest strengths, Tom exceeded by miles. Now, that's Tom's side of it. I think it's clear why Jon Jones would take a guy like Tom Aspinall serious off that alone, but Jones has taken other people seriously before and came out on top. What's different this time around? I think it's simple, and granted, at the time of recording this, Jones only has one fight at heavyweight and is going to fight Stipe later tonight. But Jones is not the same fighter that he was when he was dominating the light heavyweight division. You kind of see it against Cyril Gane, and you see it against Dominic Reyes, his two most recent fights, that Jones is just not there anymore. Against Gane, his first fight at heavyweight, he looked extremely awkward on the feet, and his striking simply wasn't there. He wasn't as fast, he had trouble connecting, and generally wasn't at his best. There's even a point in the middle of the round where he just sort of spins in the middle of the octagon for no apparent reason. Of course, his ground game still looked pretty good, and you got to remember, he's not fighting a wrestler in Cyril Gane. He's fighting a striker, and while Tom Aspinall is also a striker, we've seen Tom be able to wrestle before, albeit against a non-impressive opponent. But Aspinall also has some of the highest fight IQ in the division. You can watch him break down fights on his TikTok or YouTube channel all the time, and from the ones I've seen, he normally gets them right. Most recently, he predicted that Topuria would drop Max Holloway, and that's exactly what happened at UFC 308. My point in saying that is we've seen Tom break down Jones' wrestling and how he shoots takedowns before. And obviously that doesn't mean he'd be able to accurately stop them, but he's at least got that going for him. Against Reyes, Jon also looked awkward on his feet. And while he clearly won rounds 4 and 5, it was like he regressed as a fighter in that fight back to the man who had fought Gustafsson the first time. And because of it, was beaten by Reyes. And I know who won this fight is contentious among fans, so I'll leave my own opinion out of it. But he was getting beaten for the first 2 or 3 rounds before turning it around in the 4th and 5th. If Jones had fought against Reyes the way he did against Gustafsson the second time, I have no doubt in my mind he probably would have finished him before they even got to the championship rounds. But this is why Jones is ducking Tom. Tom is simply too much of a danger at heavyweight for Jones to want to risk fighting against. And let me be clear, I think Jones could have a decent shot against Aspinall if he comes in a bit heavier and uses his wrestling to his advantage. Staying on the feet with Tom is just not something I believe he can do, especially at this old age of 37. And given his performance in his last two fights, maybe like he says, he's just not feeling it anymore, and that's why he will only fight legends. Maybe that's the only way he can get up and train leading the fight day and get out of bed on that Saturday morning that would be the day of the event. But Jon Jones, on the off chance you hear this, fight Tom Aspinall. You could probably do a decent job against him, and if you win, you could retire, and none of us will ever bother your legacy again.